Welcome back to the Lazy Overachiever Show. I'm your host, Naketa Ren Thigpen, excited to be with you, brilliant beauties and beautifully reformed perfectionists. Today, I am excited to have a twin in the play. She is an energetic twin. She is a spiritual twin. She is a brilliance twin and just plain old amazing. But you'll understand in a second. I want you to meet Leanne Mair. She is the Brit Jamaican CEO and founder of Benefactum Consulting Group, a leadership coach, international speaker, and happens to be an impactful contributor to so many highly recognized places like LinkedIn Type Voice for Gender Equity 2023 and 2024. She has been featured in Investment Week, Business Insider, and Essence. And if I do recall, just last week, she had a whole spread in another magazine on like Leanne's favorite things. It was amazing. I really liked it. And I got a couple of good tips too. She has been an amazing, incredible, most importantly, mother, wife, friend, and daughter. Leanne, welcome to the TLO. How are you today?
Oh, excited. Come on, Naketa. The twins are twinning. So I'm happy to be here. What are we going to be doing today? What are we going to be discussing today? And of course, I've watched the show, so I know we're in for a ride.
Yeah.
We're gonna keep you all braced. Get strapped in. It's about to get real.
It's really about to get real. We should have recorded our green room conversation, although it was more like Naketa and Leanne after dark, because we were definitely tearing it up in the how do you relax at home when you're a married woman type streets. Like we were really we were in it, but we'll leave that for beyond the paywall for another episode. We had such a good time. All right, Leanne, I need you to tell everyone how you are managing the multiple incredible hats that you are wearing right now, because you have quite a few and you are wearing them quite well.
Hey, thank you. Do you know, it's so funny. I was having this conversation earlier on today, and you know how I feel about kind of managing everything with the kind of wheel and spoke method and finding kind of my anchor point. But the reality is that, and I love the fact that this is called the Lazy Overachiever. We want everything to be perfect. Mm-hmm. We want it to be perfect immediately. We know how good we can be. And it was a really good friend of mine. I was like, look, why, as I'm careening towards being 40, am I constantly asking myself, am I successful? And he came back to me and he said something really important. He said, it's because you know the potential of what you could do.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that's what keeps me motivated, which is like, it's always pushing forward because I know I could do more. But at the same time, I recognize that I'm only human. I recognize that, you know, people talk about how many hours in the day and we all have the same 24 hours and we can theorize as to how people allocate time. But one of the things that I am very cognizant of is being present.
Yeah.
Being intentional and being focused. And one of the things of allowing me to wear all these different hats has been being intentionally intentional. So it's like double emphasis on both, which is intentionality is one of the most difficult things to practice. Yeah. And it is in many ways, for me, a practice. I am intentional, but sometimes my intention is born out of frustration, not out of strategy. And I have to kind of take steps back to go, is this thing that I'm wanting to do, or is this thing that I'm doing aligned with the intention of my values? Is this aligned with the intention of my lifestyle? Is this aligned with the intention of the way I envisioned living? Is this aligned with the intention that I have of being a mother, friend, daughter, all these other characteristics? So you find that I find that I'm often in introspective and retrospective learning loops.
Yeah.
So I'm very clear on sometimes taking a pause because my brain never stops. Like my brain actually doesn't. I don't ever stop working really. My brain does like, but I am very intentional about saying, look, I need to process, and
Yeah.
creating that time to process. Being introspective, retrospective is almost like a continuous benchmarking exercise that I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that I do week on week. Did I achieve? And when I say did I achieve, not in this technical way of like, I had 5 things on my to-do list. Did I achieve them in that sense? It's more, you know why I'm smiling when I say this. You know, what's the taste left over in my mouth after the week,
Yeah.
right? Did
Yeah.
I did I taste, see, feel, hear all the things I wanted to? And that's not including the things I hate doing. Like, if anyone knows, I hate doing admin, right? That's part and parcel of life. That's what work is. But around those things that you don't like doing, have I built enough touch points of enjoyment, engagement, focus, creativity, strategic uplift, all these kinds of things? And that's the only way I do it. So like, my brain is shooting in all the different directions, but somehow in that chaos
Mm-hmm.
comes order. Um, and the more you do it, the quicker everything starts to fire quicker, so you don't realize you're doing it. But that's really the way that I process things. So no week ever looks the same, and I'm very
Yeah.
privileged to be able to have that space. Um, that I can wake up one day and say, "Meh, today's not that day where I feel like doing this. I'll do it tomorrow." Um, and I recognize that privilege, but it's definitely something that I have trained myself to do because it's an important muscle that I need.
No, I love that. There's so many layers to what you just said, from being intentional about immersing those kind of physical rest breaks that allow your mind to sit in reflection of where
Mm,
am I along the line. You know me and my analogies. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm like always making up some crazy analogy. Earlier today we were talking about baby proofing rooms and metal cages and stuff when we were having a different meeting. So like we're always like doing analogies, which I love the twin of us. And to give a little context as a small sidebar segue for anyone listening. So we're not physical twins. There is a 7+ year difference between us, but we were born on the same day.
that we
So,
were
big up July 28th, forever, forever, the best
always
day in the world.
of
But
the year.
like, absolutely. Um, but as I was listening to you talk about the layers, and maybe I'm a little hungry, I don't know, but I saw like you making different dishes in the kitchen.
Mm,
And I know that you make bread from scratch and some of the other things that you do, but I was literally picturing you like making a cake. And like when you listen to the old mothers and you say, oh, I want that recipe. And they're like, well, I don't do no measurements now. I can just, I feel what goes in it. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. I go by my senses, my feel, my texture, what tastes right. And I saw you kind of like whipping up, today's a Tuesday and today is going to look like dominating on LinkedIn. And today's
mm,
Wednesday and Wednesday is going to look like dominating in this PR interview or dominating in this leadership coaching that I'm doing or dominating in this keynote that I'm doing across the
mm-hmm,
continent. Like I saw like these different kind of mixes that no one could actually get your secret sauce because you're flowing from your spirit and your soul of what taste feels, sees, all the things, like all the senses like go into the bowl. And it was very visual. Again, I might be hungry, I don't know, but like I saw it and I really appreciate that because many times people will look at how they have to split it from like a time blocking perspective. Like, all right, well,
mm,
8 to 12, I'm doing this. And then from 12:30 to 2:30, I'm doing this. And yes, that might work for some people who they need that regimented structure. But when you are a multi-hyphenate, multi-passionate human, as you and I both are, there, and this is not a judgment or comparison for anyone whose brain and processes don't work like this, but it's honoring your inner brilliance, right? Like it's trusting your inner brilliance, what works for you. And you're like, for me, it's making the cake, making the meal, making the bread, making the whatever that's going to be beautifully eaten today because I'm choosing to make this today and or eat this today. I'm doing
mm-hmm,
it in the way that feels the most fulfilling for me because that's how you know that you're in alignment with who you are versus, oh, I have to do it the way Tina said it or Naketa said it or Lisa said it. yes, you can borrow some good methods, maybe learn some new spices, but you still have to make it your way, or else it's just not
Right.
going to be digested the same. So I really appreciated that.
Thank you. No, you're right. I think the hardest the hardest thing to do sometimes is to find your own way. And in January, I made a series of videos. They're everywhere. I think YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram. But it's like, what are the thirty things I learned whilst navigating the workplace? And one of them was most people accidentally fall upon their methodology for success. Nobody
Mm,
starts out with a methodology. That's not what happens.
real
It's that
talk.
you go back and you realize that you have a way of working
Hmm.
that ends up working for you, that ends up working for organizations, that ends up working for your coaching clients, which is completely fine. But you also have to recognize that every single part of this has to be tailored to not just your audience, but it has to be, it has to be tailored to the organization. It has to be tailored to the person. It has to be tailored to you. And I think there are so many parts that are forgotten when it comes to what are the secret successes. Well, the secret for success is you have to make your own sauce.
Right.
you know, my grandma always says it's the hand we make it. 5 people, same recipe. These make the difference. And I
Yeah.
think that was what I also had to learn, to discern for myself. Where was somebody giving me advice, as a guidance? And when could I basically say, guess what? I don't need your advice, not because it's not meant, not meant in a nice way, but rather that worked for you, but I am not you. And
Yeah.
this is probably the most difficult part of taking advice, is that it's usually the people closest to you who have the loudest voices, whose opinions have more weight than they should because of their proximity to you. So sometimes you take their advice as as a command, as a guide, as a must do. And it took me really being in a very toxic situation to understand that people can still exploit that proximity in order to undermine, in my case, me, but in other people's cases, you. um which is why it becomes even more important that you say to yourself, this is just a guide. These are recommendations, just like when the government makes recommendations as to how much fruit you should eat every day and how much meat and blah blah blah. They are not commandments by which you need to live. And it's in that same way you have to take the advice of others, in that same vein of, huh, it's a nice recommendation. Is it applicable to me? Yes,
Right.
no, maybe so. Um, if it isn't, fine, we don't need to discuss it with that person. You've heard it, and we move on. Um, and I've had to become a lot quicker at discerning and have become a lot quicker through training this muscle of, yeah, that's great, but it doesn't apply. Or asking the question, why are you giving me this advice? And what is the
Mm.
impact of this advice on you as well as me? Um, and when you kind of have your BS radar just just perfectly tweaked, I was like, oh, I'm not sure if I can say the full thing, so I'll just
Yes,
say
you can.
BS.
Yes, you can.
But but
Mhm.
once you've got that BS radar really refined, it's that part of your spidey senses, your
Yeah.
gut, your vagus nerve starts to go,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, no,
Hmm.
that's not advice for me. It might be
Yes.
relevant for somebody, but it's not for me, because what you're cooking over there is enchilada and I want chimichanga. And whilst there might be similarities, it's really not the same thing at all. So thank you. I appreciate that, but that's not what I'm eating or what I'm cooking today. And it's being able to discern that. And to come back to your food reference, it's being able to pick up the avocado and know it's ripe. It's being able to smell the produce, understand it before you decide to go ahead and make something with it.
I love this for so many reasons. You know, the majority of the audience of the people who listen to the Lazy Overachiever are entrepreneurs or identify as entrepreneurs. And the challenge, as we both know, in 2024, at the time of this recording, is there's still this big push of hustle culture. There's also a pendulum swing towards soft life, which has
Mm,
very loose definitions around it, because some people see soft life, which I think can be very beautiful, embracing of you deserve beautiful things, you deserve to slow down, you deserve to enjoy your process. That's how I believe soft life should be, you know, considered. But I know my brain is special sometimes. But we're hearing, my husband and I were just talking about this, I think last week. A lot of people are seeing soft life as I should just be able to do and someone else should take care of me. And that is not everyone's reality, especially when you're an entrepreneur. So if you start a business thinking that it's going to be everything is just going to fall into place and I really don't have to do any work whatsoever, I should walk in a room and people want to sign me just because I've entered, I will call that delusional, right?
yes.
And then on the other side, do you have to work 18 hours and take 14 meetings in a day? Absolutely not. That hustle and grind, sleep when you die, you know, you'll never get anything done unless you are killing yourself to make it happen. I don't agree with that either, because I also feel like that's not trusting your inner brilliance. You're not trusting your gift. You're not trusting how you've prepared. If you've hired people like leadership coaches and personal development experts and therapists and
Mm,
mentors or whatever, you're also not trusting the advisors that you've hired, or that you've asked to come in to support you if you feel like you have to push to the point that you break something. And it's coming into that, I don't want to say a compromise, but I'll say that good middle ground
mm,
space. You know, you made the meat just tender enough, right? Like just well enough. Clearly I'm hungry, guys. Like just deal with it.
yeah,
But
it's
it's almost
like,
dinner time for me here. So, but you know, like really looking at that as what works for you. And yes, you should be able to deal with, okay, I have an audit. I am going to have to work a good solid 10 hours today. But in that, make sure you hydrate. Make sure you're taking bathroom breaks. Make sure you get up and walk and take the phone call if you can, instead of sitting and getting cramps in a chair by feeling like you need to sit in front of the computer. Like there's ways for you to
mm,
create that median, that balance, that tenderization for even when it's a really hard day. But you thinking that you're just going to sleep all week and somebody's going to call you because you had this brilliant idea, or you just happen to be really charming and you think that
mm.
people are now going to push their checkbook over to you, is a little bit to the left in my little tiny opinion. What do you think?
I, I agree, and I'm going to say something slightly not controversial, but I'm going to say a slightly different take.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that um, before you get to work smart and before you get to soft life, you always have to work hard.
I agree.
Um, and I think this is the part that everyone doesn't understand. The reason why I can do certain things so quickly is because I grafted at the beginning of my career. It's because I did the crazy hours. I did the 125% availability. I did all of that stuff. And I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that that should be the way,
Mm-hmm.
but there is no escaping hard work. And it's only by understanding processes, markets, and I'm not talking capital markets, I just mean your market, your
Mm-hmm.
niche, your customer, your consumer base, and understanding that to the very depth of its soul, which requires a
Yeah.
lot of reading, a lot of focus, sometimes headaches, a lot of research. Who are your competitors? What's going on? All of that takes real painful brain work. Um, but it's only then do you really understand the problems. But it's also only then that you can't optimize a process without understanding it. And I think where we've got to in this conversation between hustle and I'm going to call it extreme soft life, which is for me, not soft life, is just outsourcing. And behind the extreme of that movement is very seedy things, but I'll leave that bit for the time being. Is the part around, is the part around like, you have to work hard, and I think that whilst every entrepreneur should get to the point where they want to outsource things, I am not a copywriter, but I can call cap on a crappy copy because I've taken my time. I can write copy. I'm not a copywriter. I'm not an expert, but I know what's rubbish, and I
Right.
also know what's good.
Mm-hmm.
And that means sharpening my toolkit in a way that has taken extra time in things that didn't necessarily make sense, but they pay dividends in many other areas, which has now allowed me the privilege of not every single day is a day where I decide that I want to have a soft day. But if there are those days, and because I message them like, oh yeah, I've decided I'm going for a 2-hour massage today,
Mm-hmm.
I'll do it.
That's
But
right.
guess what? I've put in the graft and the grind. And if I'm up at 2 o'clock in the morning working, or I get up earlier rather than staying up later. But if I'm up early, no one else is there with me. So I don't have to justify it. But I think that there is this part around, we romanticize hustling and we don't talk about the mental fallout. We talk about the soft life, but we don't talk about what's the sacrifice of. And when I say the soft life, I'm not talking about how it's meant that Black women deserve wonderful things. That is not what comes into question, because the fruit of our labor shouldn't be more work. The fruit of our labor should be enjoyment. I am very clear on that. You work hard, and it doesn't matter how much money you're earning. You work hard. You absolutely should have the space, the time, and the mindset to enjoy the fruits of your labor, unequivocally. But what's being sold as the soft life sits at a complete juxtaposition to hard work. And it is not the responsibility, and I know this is slightly off on a tangent, but I've been sitting and thinking about how when you're used to seeing people in a privileged context, you start to forget, and you normalize this life of privilege. People are starting to forget what real life is about.
Come on.
So when you're kind of talking about, oh yeah, I want this guy to take me on this kind of date, have you ever stopped to ask what you bring to the situation, right? When you say you want this kind of soft life, okay, right? So you want an $8,000 handbag, which is $16,000 gross. How much do you earn a year? And what
Right.
proportion is this bag gross of your gross income? It's these kinds of things that we're not necessarily seeing the true reflection of what hard work means, just like with entrepreneur stories. And I love it when I read these articles that say, for every unicorn or for every billionaire you see, they had 100 million failed ideas. And the idea that you see today is not the idea they started with.
Exactly.
And we hear of billionaires, and I'm not even going to get into the ethics of billionaires, but we've become talking about billionaires has become normalized, that people think it's achievable
Right.
or it's realistic to want to say you want to be a billionaire. It's really not. And I think this is where kind of perception, navigating your own way, creating your own ideals. And I asked a friend of mine recently, because of the work that she does, I said, what is an ethical goal of wealth to want to accumulate that that protects your family, provides generational wealth, but does no systemic damage to other people? And that
Yeah.
number is around $15 million or pounds, right? Now,
Wow.
lots of people are like, that doesn't sound like very much. It's a hell of a lot of money. It's just that we don't see it anymore because we're fed, oh, this is this entrepreneur and they sold their business for 300 million, which is now starting all of this overinflated numbers, values, luxury living.
Yes.
It's starting to implode because people are starting to realize, number one, celebrities own nothing. So the money that we think they have is highly inflated, not talking about the tax, and it is not cognizant or in recognition of their lifestyle. So
Yeah,
there's so much smoke and mirrors that we're constantly fed about what it means to be an entrepreneur, what is a real, what's the definition of a good wage, all these things, which makes me come back to this part about really anchoring ourselves in our reality and being intentional around what makes you happy. And if you say you want to have a business that has a revenue or turnover of 100K and you're happy with that and it allows you to do everything, that is cool.
exactly.
um you don't have to want all the 10 million, 100 million, valuations, big mansions that are, it's really, and I think that's the thing where it's really about saying, look, I want to overachieve for me,
Hmm.
not for no one else. And if someone says
Exactly.
I have to kill myself to have a unicorn, to have an organization that has a turnover of 100 million, and I have to sacrifice all the things that make my life, then I don't want it.
I fully agree. You know, from our conversations across
Mm-hmm.
international waters, when we were, talking about just privately, you and I were just having conversations about life, hope, dreams, realities, wants, luxuries, the definition of luxury, like what are the drivers of, some of the, wonderful fave things that you like versus those non-negotiables that you can't have without. Like, how I feel about it personally. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
really should be what makes you feel fulfilled and not the label that you feel like someone else would give you a high five for because you're rocking it or they can see it. So I 1,000% agree with everything that you were saying. The other element that you mentioned earlier on in our conversation was about that muscle, about building the muscle, which I think gets lost in the conversation of permission to pause and slow down, as well as that hustle grind. You
Mm-hmm.
need to build the muscle. Like you said, the hard work doesn't have to be like you come from the world of asset management and corporate. Your hours are probably bananas as opposed to maybe a lawyer in a certain segment of law, or opposed to a doctor who is not allowed to work more than 80 hours a week, based on that particular state's law or whatever the case is. But you knowing that you have to build the muscle to appreciate when it's being relaxed, right? Like if you're just always in a relaxed, I say this so cheekily and with so much love, wobbly, flabby state, it's really hard to appreciate it because you've never actually built it. But if you're willing to put the work in and do whatever is
Mm-hmm.
necessary for you to get to that space of, I don't even want to say happiness, but that space of contentment, that's
Mm-hmm.
very different than complacency, because I abhor personally complacency because I am someone who wants more and I don't apologize for wanting more. I know what my
Right.
more looks like, right? Like, and knowing that you can have the and more dot and you don't have to berate yourself because someone else says isn't that enough. And
Right.
on the same side, what does the more mean to you? Like what is your more doing for you? And if you happen to
Right.
have a baby legacy or a birthed human baby legacy, how is your more giving to them so
Mm.
that they can also kind of continue and carry and maybe even benefit from whatever the more is that you've achieved. So I really appreciate the layers of what you're saying, down to the reality that a lot of us are just not defining what it is that we want. We're looking to the gram, we're looking to TikTok, we're looking to LinkedIn, we're looking to whatever or whoever to tell us what should we have, instead of
Mm.
saying like, let me create some spaciousness, let me be intentionally selfish, have this 5 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days, 6 weeks, whatever it is that I need to hear myself, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is really important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's like I always think about in any situation, no matter where you live, what city you live in, a city is a living thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is it that as someone I've always done this, before I travel as well. I'm like, what is it that I want out of this city? What is it that I want to understand, right? What is it? How do I want to connect with this city? it's almost like you're doing the reconnaissance on a person. What is it that's there that kind of speaks to my soul? And there was this one woman on TikTok, and she was like, I want my summer to be popping, so I've got to start to get planning. And it's that part. So by the time this episode comes out, I would have already posted about this. But the thing that I'm posting about tomorrow in terms of creating space for success is be intentional about your fun.
Yeah, come on.
Create your fun fund. Now, my fun fund is books. And when I
Mm-hmm.
say books, mine's romance. To know me is to know that I am very all in romance books written by Black female authors all day,
Mm-hmm.
every day. I started with Regency novels, but then, with my learnings, I was like, yeah, that's not for me, right? Um, but the long and the short of it is guilty pleasures. Pleasure should never be guilty.
Yeah.
And if you're allocating a budget for your house, your car, your rent, your holidays, all of these different contributions, why aren't you allocating money for your fun that doesn't have to be a big spend? It might be that you say to yourself, like I see all these videos, people are like, okay, I know prices of coffee in America are absolutely insane,
Yeah.
plus the tax, plus the tips, which is just ridiculous. So people are spending like $11 on coffee, which blows my mind. But anyway, but it might be that you say, look, I'm going to treat myself every day to XYZ coffee.
Yep.
Or, you and your tea. But one of the books that I read, it's in German, unfortunately, but it's talking about the art of living a creative life. And he was
Mm-hmm.
like, create a tradition around making your tea. Boil the kettle. Once you boil the kettle, put the pouring water into the cup, warm up the cup, da 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 da. Make sure you have your special cup. I'm a cup collector. This is why none of the cups in our kitchen match, because look, this is a British one, Emma Bridgewater. They don't match because I keep buying cups. I buy cups everywhere.
I love
But
it.
it's that part around, like, my husband knows, like, when we travel, I'm going to buy a cup and I'm going to buy a water bottle. I also have a water bottle addiction. Nevertheless, I digress. But it's being intentional about our fun,
Mm-hmm.
but allocating money that's not huge. It doesn't have to be $500 a month. It can be like 100, it can be 50, it can be 10, whatever it is, just to start to reconnect with the things that make us happy, whether it's buying a crossword puzzle book and doing a puzzle a day, um, but also finding ways to connect away from our devices. Um, that's not. I love reading books. Unfortunately, I like reading books on my Kindle because it's easy with kids. But because you can't always sit with a light on and read a book. But the
Yeah.
point is, life does life things, and you kind of, it gets in the way. But finding those ways to connect with life outside, tangibility, smells, all these things, just adds a different element to how you get to show up, how you become a better version of you, how you become a better entrepreneur, how you become a better mother, father, wife, brother, sister, husband, all those things, is just, for me, by being intentional about your fun as much as everything else.
No, I completely agree. My husband has a tattoo that he designed on his arm that says "Create to live and live to create." And
Mm,
it's both a mantra, philosophy, manifesto, like all of it, and it's beautifully capturing of exactly what you're saying. Like, know what you're here for at the end of the
mm,
day, but you also are also saying, what from what I hear, enjoy the process. And if you're doing a lot of the work but not enjoying the process, there's a bit of martyrdom in that maybe you don't appreciate it in the moment, but your older, less agile, more feeble version of yourself is going to miss that you missed out on the
correct.
opportunity to enjoy your life along the way. So
Right.
wow, you're powerful. I have to ask you one of my signature questions for the Lazy
Hit me.
Overachiever.
Hit me. Hit me.
Yes, I'm hitting you. So, when you are not wearing all of your hats, being intentional about how you're immersing yourself in your process to allow, space for reflection, celebration, alignment checks along the way, how are you also giving yourself like that space to be intentionally selfish? Like when Leanne just needs to disconnect, especially because you're a wife and a mother and you're a daughter and a granddaughter and you're very, very connected to your family. Like, how are you creating that? Like, okay, everything needs to come off so I can have this moment of pure recalibration. Like, what does that look like for you when you really need it?
A book.
Mm,
So that's me, nobody else.
yeah.
And it's really funny. I suffer from insomnia from time to time. Um, and I suffer from two things. One is insomnia and sometimes nightmares. And as a person who suffers from nightmares, when you're going to have a nightmare, you know that you know your nightmare is coming, so you try to avoid sleep to avoid the nightmare, and then essentially you still fall asleep anyway. You still have the nightmare, etc. But one of my favorite things to do that's just for me is I will read pretty much all night until the sun comes up. And
Mm,
that is because I have I rarely talk about this, but I have a very strange affinity to the color of light. So I'm really sensitive to the different shades of light. So like one of the things I enjoy is when the sun casts a purple light into my room,
mhm.
into my bedroom.
Yes. Hmm.
Or that it's like slightly tinged with pink. Like I always notice it, and there's certain spaces in the apartment that have different lights, and I enjoy that. So the ultimate kind of thing for me is it's not always at sunrise. Sometimes it can be kind of around the midday, but I'll be like, no, I need to enjoy the sunlight
Yeah.
with a book, no music. Because as I'm
Hmm.
getting older, I can't listen to music and concentrate. I don't enjoy it. I like the purity of being escaped, being of I like the purity of escaping into a book and feeling and imagining all the sights, sounds, smells. So yeah, so that's kind of my kind of haven, and I dip into that as often as I feel necessary. So it might be okay, I'm on a train. Let me quickly get like I won't have a physical book, I'll have my Kindle. Let me quickly
Hmm.
whack out my phone, let me read my book on here. Boom, ready, chilled down, relaxed, mellowed, blah, blah, blah. And because of the types of books that I read in terms of like romance, but they're not just romance, they're romance with thematics around like neurodivergence, they're thematics around dealing with loss and, coaching, they're thematics around kind of American history. There's so much education going on and
Yeah.
questions and everything that it's really soothing to so many parts of my brain, the intellectual part, the romantic part, the loving part. um I also like to play the game of trying to guess the outcome, like by the time I'm halfway through the story. And but like it's all those things. So books for me are definitely it used to be music,
Hmm.
which is still a way, but it doesn't music triggers nostalgia,
Hmm.
and books trigger rejuvenation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And in that um, kind of framing, we are definitely in the same part of the continuum of our twin space. Is I love good music, and it has its place for me for sure. When I'm cooking, I love to listen to music and dance and shake my booty and all the things. But when I'm needing to just come into me, one of the ways that I come into me is also reading.
Mm,
And it's and sometimes I can start that with like a podcast, like a really good conversational
mm,
podcast that's just two women laughing, joking, telling a story, maybe talking about something trending, and then I'll go into reading, and then I put all of that down and I'll go into like meditating, prayer, and just listening and just pure stillness, which took me a long time to get to because
mm,
like you, my brain is going, like going, and has all these beautifully colored file folders of information that I'm
mm,
typically flipping through when I need to be like, stop touching the file folder, Naketa, and just be still. And I've gotten really, really good at it over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, but it took a minute. And honestly, I think it started when I became a G Bunny, when my granddaughter was first born in 2018. It was like, okay, I need something a little different, because being with her, you can't always read a book, right? Like, with the
Right.
baby, like you can't always do the thing. And certain music, because she's on the ASD spectrum, was triggering to her and irritated her. So it was like, all right, I got to spend this time with my baby, and I got to do, what I can do in this time, but also be able to pray for her and pour into her in a way that felt authentic, which meant I had to learn to be more still with me. So I'm listening to you like, yep, twin. Mm-hmm. Like,
where have you been?
Somebody likes TikTok, y'all. Like, that's all I'm saying.
Not gonna deny it. Not gonna deny it. Not gonna deny it.
It's the fun that you were talking about, right? Like, is making room for fun. Nothing wrong with it.
Nobody's seen the videos that we've got for fun. Me forcing TikTok trends on people. No shame.
I'm not
kind
mad.
of think. I think that's like my party trick. What will Leanne do? She will force a TikTok trend on you that you had no idea about.
Right. That didn't even know existed. That's so funny. So, Leanne, how can people connect with you and learn more about some of your hats? Because you have some beautiful ones that are being blown up all over the internet, from your book to your articles to videos and all of it. Where can people go to find more?
So you can go to www.leannemeir.com just to kind of get a little précis overview. I'm active on Instagram at Leanne MM. I'm also active on LinkedIn, Leanne-Meir.
I love it. And for those of you who are listening and haven't scrolled down to the bottom of the show notes yet, it's Mair. I know her accent makes it sound like it's, Myerah, but it's the Brit Jamaican in her that's really sounding it out. I had to write out pronunciation. It's hilarious.
It's not even this is my married name. So, that's why it's the funky spelling with the funky pronunciation. Sorry, people.
I love it.
Alas, I will be forgiven.
Thank you, Leanne, for coming to the Lazy Overachiever, being vulnerable, being honest, being giving, and just sharing who you are and how you showed up to the person that you are showing up to be every single day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I can't wait to tune in to your other episodes and just connect with your listeners. So thank you for having me. And I look forward to meeting you all somewhere online in the metaverse. If not, in a book. Have a good day, evening, whatever it might be. Thank you so much for having me, Naketa.
You're welcome. Lazy Overachievers, as usual, the most potent humans always. Leanne is a chef gift for everyone listening. And of course, I really am going to eat something and a few beats.
Please,
after this.
We're begging.
Right? Like for all of the reasons. But before I go whip up something in the kitchen, I want you to make sure that you continue to embrace a little bit more of your laziness by working less and trusting your inner brilliance more. But don't forget, you got to build the muscle. Talk soon.